Tucked behind a rainy side street in downtown Seattle stood Lighthouse Bakery, where the air was thick with the scent of warm butter, cinnamon, and rising dough. On Monday morning, Nora Sullivan, 27 years old, leaned down to pull a tray of fresh loaves from the oven, her ponytail dusted with flour, hands expertly moving despite the mess. She was an irreplaceable part of the small shop, even if just a part-time baker. Nora didn't love baking, but the paycheck kept her sister alive. Ivy, her younger sister, was battling end-stage liver failure, and each morning before leaving for work, Nora checked Ivy's dialysis machine, wiped the sweat off her pale forehead, and whispered soft encouragement before locking the door to their shared one-bedroom apartment. After her shift, Nora would rush across town to the community center, where she taught free art classes for kids with disabilities, the only part of her day that brought her peace. Every dollar she made disappeared into hospital bills. The transplant would cost nearly $180,000, 0 cents, and insurance barely covered half. Nora had done the math over and over, but that number stood like an immovable wall. Without the surgery, Ivy had only months left. That afternoon, as Nora wiped the bakery counter, Callie, her college friend, walked in. She wore a crisp blouse and carried a paper bag and a hopeful smile. "Brought you something," Callie said, setting a cream-colored invitation trimmed with silver onto the counter. A charity gala hosted by Heart Innovations. They fund a lot of transplant grants and medical research. The ticket was supposed to be mine, but I have a conference in Boston this weekend. Nora hesitated. "Me? At a gala? I don't even own a proper dress, just thrift store hand-me-downs." Callie smiled. "Exactly why you should go. For Ivy. You just need one person to believe in your story. One conversation can change everything." Nora stared at the invitation. It was heavy in her hands, like something meant for someone else. But in her mind, she saw Ivy curled up on their battered sofa, breath shallow, and she nodded. "Okay, but if I embarrass myself, I'm blaming you." Callie laughed, eyes sparkling. "Deal. Just promise me you'll show up." The dress Nora wore once belonged to Ivy, a simple navy blue gown her sister had worn to a graduation party 3 years ago. Now it hung loosely on Nora's frame, the hem slightly unraveled, the waist held in place by safety pins. Her brown hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and her black flats were scuffed and worn thin. That was all she had. She stood in front of the Regal Grand Seattle, a glittering hotel awash in gold light. A red carpet rolled out across the stairs. Luxury cars lined the street, and women in flowing gowns stepped out, arms linked with tuxedoed men, camera flashes going off in bursts. Nora swallowed hard. The invitation in her hand suddenly felt like a joke, but it was all the hope she had. She walked up the marble steps, holding her head high, gripping her old leather clutch. At the reception desk, a blonde woman in a black suit greeted her with a tight smile and scrutinizing eyes. "Good evening. Your name?" "Nora Sullivan," she replied, steadying her voice. The woman tapped briskly on an iPad, pausing. "I'm sorry, that name isn't on the list. This ticket was issued to Callie Jensen." "Yes, she's my friend. She couldn't make it, so she gave it to me." The woman raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow, her gaze cooling. "I'm afraid we don't allow ticket transfers. This is a private, invitation-only event. If your name isn't listed, I'll have to ask you to leave." Nora felt her face burn. Behind her, a few guests murmured, some with soft chuckles that weren't meant to be kind. "She probably thinks this is a free soup kitchen. Looks like she ran in from a bakery." Nora opened her mouth to explain, but her throat tightened. Inside her purse was a printed page, an overview of Ivy's illness, costs, transplant urgency. She had folded it carefully, ready to hand it to someone. But no one here would even give her the chance. "Please, I just need a few minutes inside. I promise I won't cause any trouble. My sister is very sick and—" "I'm sorry," the receptionist interrupted, voice firmer now. A tall security guard had stepped forward. "You'll need to step aside." Then, a voice cut through the air, deep, clear, commanding. "What seems to be the problem here?" All heads turned. A man in a sleek black tuxedo stepped out of a black sedan, tall and composed, dark hair slightly tousled, eyes the color of rain-soaked steel. Julian Hart, founder of Hart Innovations, host of the evening. Nora froze. His gaze scanned the scene, landing on Nora, her frayed dress, trembling hands, and eyes filled with helpless determination. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. "She's my wife," he said evenly. "She's with me." The receptionist blinked. "But she's not on—" "I don't care about the list. She's coming in," Julian said, voice leaving no room for argument. The security guard backed away. The crowd parted. Julian stepped beside Nora, placing a gentle but firm hand at her back. "Let's go," he said softly, "just for her." Nora followed, half-legged, her heart pounding like a drum. The world behind her fell away, swallowed by gold light and the hum of orchestral strings. For the first time, the girl whose name wasn't on the list walked into a ballroom of power and privilege, not because she belonged, but because someone believed she did. The VIP lounge tucked behind the main hall was unusually quiet, bathed in soft, ambient light from crystal chandeliers overhead. Plush red carpet softened every step, and tasteful decor gave the room a calm, understated elegance. Nora sat on the edge of a leather chair, clutching her purse like it was the last thread holding her together. Julian stood near the window, hands in his pockets, eyes cast out toward the distant city lights. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The space between them felt suspended, heavy yet calm. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Julian asked at last, still not turning around. Nora furrowed her brow. I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." He turned now, and his eyes no longer held cool detachment, but something gentler. 2 years ago, a street festival in Pioneer Square, my son, Aiden, went into anaphylactic shock after eating something with peanuts. I panicked, and then you appeared. Nora froze. The image hit her like a crashing wave. A little boy, maybe 3 or 4, gasping for air, turning blue as the crowd around him fell into chaos. She had taken a basic first aid course at the community center. Without thinking, she'd rushed forward, dug through his backpack, found the EpiPen, and administered it. When his breathing steadied, she'd quietly walked away. That was your son?" she whispered. Julian nodded. "Aiden, he's alive because of you. But I just did what anyone would have done." "Not everyone acts," he said softly. "I tried to find you afterward, asked around, but you left no name, no number, just a girl with a gentle voice and eyes that told me things would be okay." Nora looked down. She never thought that fleeting act would linger so long in someone's memory. Julian took a step closer. "Tonight, I saw them shame you at the door of a gala I'm hosting. No one stepped in, and I couldn't let that happen again. Calling you my wife was the fastest way to make them stop." Her eyes widened. "You lied for me? You saved my child. That's not something I could ignore." Silence settled again. Outside the window, light rain had begun to fall, smudging the city in silver streaks. Nora reached into her bag, her fingers brushing the folded page she had printed that morning, a summary of Ivy's condition, medical costs, and their dwindling options. "I'm not looking for a handout," she said quietly. "I came tonight because my sister is dying, and I don't know where else to turn." Julian glanced at the paper she offered, but didn't read it right away. Instead, he sat across from her, his voice steady and low. "You don't have to explain, but if you still want to attend this gala as a guest, I can walk beside you. No one will question it again." She hesitated. Her dress was old, her shoes tired, her mind spinning. But in his eyes, she didn't see pity, she saw respect. "Okay," she said softly, "but I don't know how to behave at events like this." Julian smiled, his first real smile. "Just walk like you belong. I'll be right there with you." Under the warm glow of the grand ballroom chandeliers, violins sang softly, each note floating like silk through the air. Everything shimmered and sparkled, but to Nora, it all felt like a dream. She walked slowly beside Julian, still gripping her old clutch like a shield. But he walked tall, steady, as if there were no lie in the world. Guests began to take notice. Is that Julian Hart? And who's the woman with him? His wife? The whispers circled the room like rising steam. Nora lowered her gaze, wishing she could shrink. But Julian held his head high, like nothing about this evening was out of place. Just as they passed the reception table, a high-pitched voice pierced the air. "Dad!" A young boy came darting through the crowd, wearing a tiny suit with a crooked bow tie. His curls bounced, his gray eyes sparkled. He skidded to a stop in front of Nora, eyes wide as saucers. "It's you," he exclaimed. "You're the lady who saved me at the fair. You made me breathe again." Nora knelt down, stunned. "You remember me?" The boy nodded enthusiastically, then threw his arms around her waist, burying his face in her old dress. "You said I was a superhero. I told Daddy all the time, but he couldn't find you." The crowd began to quiet. Curious glances turned softer, gentler. An older woman nearby placed a hand over her heart. "She's the one who saved Julian's son?" A photographer lifted his camera. "Get this. This is the shot." Nora flushed, gently stroking Aiden's sweaty curls. "You have a great memory," she said softly. "I'm so happy to see you doing well." Aiden beamed. "You said I didn't need a cape to be a superhero." Across the room, Julian watched. He had seen his son smile before, but never like this. Never this wide, this bright, this free. A woman in a sleek black gown approached him, her tone sharp beneath a velvet voice. "So that's really your wife, Julian?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on Aiden and Nora. "She's the woman who saved my son's life," he said simply. The woman fell quiet and backed away. No one else dared ask. Aiden tugged Nora toward the dessert table, pointing at a cupcake with pink frosting. "Try this one, it's so good." Nora laughed and let herself be pulled along, swept into the chaotic, beautiful world of a 5-year-old's joy. Meanwhile, Julian made his way over, wine glass in hand, his eyes softer than they had been all evening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Nora nodded, brushing Aiden's hair as he licked frosting from his fingers. "He's wonderful. Thank you for everything." Julian inclined his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "No need to thank me," he said, "because the truth is, you're not just saving Aiden once. You're doing it again. Right now." She didn't understand immediately, but something in his voice, quiet, sincere, made her heart stumble. In a ballroom full of polished people and designer dresses, for the first time, she didn't feel like she didn't belong. Beside the colorful dessert table, Aiden's laughter had pulled the evening into something softer, more human. But as night fell outside the Grand Hotel's glass doors, Nora knew the real reason she came tonight still waited, untouched, in her purse. The gala was winding down. The music softened to a distant hum, and guests began slipping away under chandeliers dimmed to gold. Nora stood beside Julian, her shoulders relaxed, for the first time that night. No one whispered anymore. Not tonight. Julian handed her a glass of water instead of wine. "You did well," he said quietly, as if he knew just how hard she'd fought to hold it together. Nora offered a tired, genuine smile. Outside, the Seattle night breeze tugged at her hair as they stepped into the waiting car. Inside the quiet of the ride, Julian finally broke the silence. "You came tonight because of Ivy, didn't you?" Nora clutched her bag tighter on her lap. Her eyes drifted to the window. The city blurred past, buildings melting into smudges of light. "Yes," she said. "I came in Callie's place. She said there might be medical sponsors there. Ivy needs a liver transplant. Insurance won't cover enough. I just hope someone might listen." She opened her purse slowly, pulling out a neatly folded page. The same one she had carried all evening. "This has everything. Diagnosis, waitlist details, cost breakdown. I brought it just in case. Someone cared enough to look." Julian took it from her gently, skimming the document. His face didn't change, but his fingers curled tighter around the paper. Nora, let me cover Ivy's transplant, fully, as a thank you for saving Aiden's life. She stared at him, stunned. Her heart kicked against her ribs, not out of relief, but because something deeper, more stubborn, flared up. No, she shook her head. I can't accept that. I didn't come tonight to ask for money. I came hoping to find a way to do this for her myself. I don't want Ivy surviving off someone's pity. Julian paused for a long beat. Then his voice softened. Then, let me offer something else. She looked up. Aiden's nanny is retiring soon. He needs someone after school, a few hours a day, someone patient, trustworthy, someone he already cares about. You've clearly connected with him in a way no one has. Would you consider taking the job? Nora blinked. You want me to work for you? Julian nodded. Not just watching him. You can teach him art, play, talk. You'd stay in the guest house on my estate outside Seattle. I'll pay well. And Ivy? We can move her to a private hospital nearby. You're not accepting charity, Nora. You're earning it. Nora was silent. She had never imagined an offer like this. Not a gift, but a path. You trust me enough to live in your home and care for your son? I trust Aiden, Julian replied gently, and he trusts you. A soft laugh escaped her lips. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that baked for pennies, that wiped Ivy's forehead through long nights, and nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. For Aiden, and for Ivy. Julian said nothing, just nodded, quiet approval in his eyes. When the car pulled up outside her rundown apartment, Nora placed her hand on the door handle. Julian's voice stopped her. I'll have everything ready tomorrow. Rest tonight. You've been strong long enough. She stepped out into the night, the door closing behind her. But this time, it didn't feel like returning to where she started. This time, it felt like stepping into something new. At night, Nora lay on the old sofa next to a sleeping Ivy, the contract still unsigned, the future still uncertain. But the next morning, as the sunlight streamed through the window of the old apartment, she knew she could not return to her old life. Not after Aiden looked at her as if she were the hero he had been waiting for. The guest house at the edge of the Hart estate in the outskirts of Seattle felt like another world, quiet, shaded with tall trees and flooded with natural light. The little white house had a porch that overlooked a shimmering lake, warm wooden floors and a tiny fireplace tucked into the corner. For Nora, it wasn't luxury, it was peace. Every morning, she picked up Aiden from preschool, walking hand in hand along tree-lined paths. He'd chatter endlessly, what he ate that day, whether his teacher laughed, whether he drew the red dinosaurs she'd once helped him sketch. Some afternoons, he'd drag her into the garden, insisting they go treasure hunting among the lavender bushes. You're the knight and I'm the superhero, Aiden declared, brandishing a wooden stick as a sword. Nora laughed, kneeling in the dirt beside him, not caring that her skirt got stained. Julian still worked long days. He usually came home late, stepping into the house in his gray suit, weariness in his shoulders. At first, they only exchanged polite nods and greetings. But slowly, he began lingering at the threshold of the guest house, silently watching as Nora and Aiden colored, read books, or laughed under the soft yellow glow of evening lamps. One Saturday evening, Julian came home early. Nora and Aiden were making cookies, more mess than success. The kitchen smelled of burnt chocolate and joy. Julian stood at the door, his shirt collar unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, watching the smoke wafting from the oven. You know we have a housekeeper, right? He asked, grinning. Nora turned, laughing sheepishly. Hayden said cookies were your favorite, but we may have failed. Julian stepped in, picked up a slightly scorched cookie, took a bite, and winced. Yeah, failure confirmed. Aiden giggled. But I made it for you, Dad. Julian tousled his hair. And I love it. Best cookie ever. They had dinner together that night, a simple plate of pasta and a little red wine. In the warm glow of the dining room, Julian talked about the early days of building his company, while Nora told stories about the bakery she once worked in and her art classes at the community center. "Do you miss that place?" Julian asked. Nora nodded. "It's where I found myself, among kids no one else wanted to teach." There was a pause. Then Julian said quietly, "Maybe you're doing that again with Aiden." Nora didn't reply, but when Aiden fell asleep against her shoulder, Julian gently lifted him, then returned with a look that was no longer just gratitude. It was something deeper, something tender. He poured another glass of wine for both of them, and they sat in the soft glow, talking quietly about little things. Aiden's favorite songs, the Seattle rain, or the scent of lavender outside. When Nora finally rose to return to the guest house, Julian opened the door for her, but instead of a hurried good night, he simply said, "Thank you for bringing laughter back to this place." And for the first time, Nora didn't feel like she was just working here. She felt like she was living. On Friday morning, Nora knelt to tie Aiden's shoelaces in front of his preschool gate when a sleek black SUV pulled up. The door opened and a tall woman stepped out, golden hair curled to perfection, red stilettos tapping like gunshots on the pavement. Her eyes scanned Nora like she was a discounted item in a thrift shop. Then she removed her sunglasses. Ice's eyes sharp and assessing. "You must be Nora Sullivan." Nora stood, her hand still gently holding Aiden's. "Yes, I'm Aiden's caregiver." The woman smirked. "I know, your name's making the rounds." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I'm Celeste Monroe, Julian's former partner, and the daughter of Heart Innovation's largest shareholder." A blow without touching. "Looks like he has a thing for simplicity," Celeste sneered, eyeing Nora's plainclothes. "But I'm not so easily fooled." "What do you want?" Nora asked, steadying her voice. Celeste tilted her head. "To remind you that fairy tales don't last. I've seen women like you come and go, playing angel until the truth cracks through." Then lower, darker. "If you really care about Julian and Aiden, you'll leave before it goes too far." Aiden tugged Nora's hand, his voice anxious. "Miss Nora, who is she? You're not leaving, right?" Nora knelt, smoothing his curls. "No, Aiden, I'm here for you." But inside, she trembled. That evening, back in the guest house, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a trending post. Is Julian Hart secretly married to a baker girl? Who is Nora Sullivan, mystery woman at the Hart Gala? The photo, slightly blurred, captured her and Julian side by side at the gala. The comments cut deeper. Classic gold digger move. Is this Cinderella or a PR stunt? Feeling downgraded hard. Nora dropped the phone on the table, heart pounding. The next morning, from the main house, Julian's voice thundered through the halls. "I don't care what the board thinks. This is personal. If anyone keeps leaking stories, I'll sue." When he stepped out and saw her in the hallway, his voice softened. "You heard that?" he asked gently. Nora nodded. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. Maybe I should go." Julian walked closer. "Because of some comments online? You've done nothing wrong." "And Celeste?" she whispered. "She came to the school. Said I'm just another charity case in your life." Julian's jaw tightened. "Celeste doesn't get to define you. She's always tried to control everything, including me." Nora looked down. "I didn't come here to be a problem. I came to help Ivy. But now, I'm pulling you and Aiden into the storm." Julian paused, then said, low and steady, "You brought laughter back to my son, and you're teaching me that the best things in life don't come from control, but from trust." Nora said nothing, but that night she didn't sleep. She knew she had to choose whether to stay or leave before this fragile beginning shattered completely. The phone rang, jolting Nora from sleep. Her heart pounded as she grabbed it. The caller ID read St. Francis Hospital, where Ivy was being treated. "Ms. Sullivan, this is Dr. Carter. Ivy's condition has worsened. She's suffered internal bleeding and her liver enzymes have spiked. We've moved her to the ICU. You should come immediately." Nora leapt from bed, throwing on a shawl and rushing out without a second thought. She didn't call Julian, didn't think about anyone. There was only one person in her mind, Ivy. By the time she reached the hospital, Ivy was stabilized, but the doctor was clear. She needed a liver transplant within 10 days or less. The public donor list is too long, the doctor sighed. Her chances are close to zero, unless someone sponsors a switch to the private system. Nora sat frozen in the ICU hallway. It felt like she'd returned to square one, helpless, breathless, crushed by fear. Just as dawn broke, Julian appeared at the end of the corridor. He wore a gray wool coat, his hair tousled, his expression strained. "You left without saying anything," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry. I didn't think. I just knew I had to be here." He sat beside her without a word. Minutes passed in silence. Then he asked, "How long does she have?" 10 days, maybe less. More silence. Then he stood. "Come with me." Nora blinked. "Where?" "There's something I want to show you." They drove to a tall glass building downtown, the headquarters of Heart Innovations. Julian led her to the 18th floor, to an unmarked door. "This is a project I've quietly built over the past 2 years," he said. "A medical relief fund. Private. No press. For the people the system forgets." He opened the door. Inside, a modest office held a whiteboard with patient names, medical notes, and dozens of thank you letters pinned to the wall. "You're not the first I've tried to help," Julian said, his eyes steady. "But you're the first who refused, not out of pride, but out of dignity." Nora stood still. She had never imagined that behind the cold exterior of a CEO was someone quietly fighting for the unseen. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want you to feel like an exception." She looked down. "And I doubted you. I thought it was pity." Julian stepped closer, his voice gentler. "You're not a burden, Nora. You're the only person who makes me feel like I don't have to get everything right all the time. I want to help Ivy, not out of debt, but because you made this family feel alive again." Their eyes locked. For the first time, no more walls. "Do you trust me?" Julian asked. Nora took a breath. "I do, and I'm not leaving." He smiled. "Then let me take care of the rest." The days that followed passed like a lucid dream. Ivy was moved to one of the top private hospitals in the city. A private room, the best doctors, and a liver transplant date scheduled far sooner than they ever dared hope. Sitting by Ivy's bedside, holding her hand, Nora didn't feel fear anymore. She felt gratitude. "So, are you living in a fairy tale now?" Ivy teased, her voice soft, but her eyes sharp as ever. "No," Nora smiled gently. "I'm just living somewhere I was chosen to stay." At the Heart Estate, things shifted quietly but undeniably. Aidan started calling her "My Miss Nora" in front of everyone, as if staking a claim. He reached for her hand first when entering a room, leaned into her shoulder when tired, and whispered secrets only they shared. Julian remained quiet, but something had softened. He'd stand silently in the kitchen, watching her bake. Once, he wordlessly brewed 2 cups of tea and placed one beside her. No words needed. One evening, after Aidan had fallen asleep, Nora and Julian sat on the guest house porch. The air was cool, but they didn't go inside. A glass of wine, a few small stories, and a long, gentle silence. Then Julian asked suddenly, "Do you think this feels like home yet?" Nora turned, her heart skipping once. "Not at first, but now. Every morning waking to Aidan's footsteps outside my door, every afternoon baking while you grumble about the mess, I think. I'm starting to believe I belong here." Julian studied her for a moment. In his eyes, she was no longer the stranger who crashed a gala. She was the woman who had changed the very rhythm of his home. "I never thought I'd share this house with anyone again," he said quietly. "But then you came, not trying to take space, just showing up at the exact right time." "I don't know what happens next," Nora whispered, "but I know if I ever leave, the first place I'll miss is here." Julian tilted his head, voice low. Then don't leave. A pause. Then the door burst open. Aiden, tousle-haired and teary-eyed, ran out. I dreamed you were gone, he cried, throwing himself into Nora's arms. She wrapped him close. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I'm right here. Julian sat beside them, wrapping his arms around both, like it was the first time he allowed himself to exhale fully. And Nora knew she was no longer a guest. She had found her home. A month later, Ivy underwent a successful liver transplant. The doctors called it a miracle of timing and trust. Nora stood outside the recovery room, clutching a keychain Aiden had given her, a little wooden cookie with messy letters spelling Super Nora. Julian stood beside her, taking her hand. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In the quiet, there was a promise that no matter what came next, they'd face it together. For Nora, happiness didn't come from being rescued. It came the moment she found a place where she could stay, not because she had something to prove, but because someone simply wanted her there.